Welcome back into another edition of The Wrap, everybody. I am Tyler Greever. Just Mark Ennis this week, no Andy Sweeney or Louis Rabeau. Mark, 2 weeks ago with Kentucky, we were all sitting here like, I don't know if they're going to make the tournament. They don't have the quad one wins. They have bad losses. Now they've won 4 in a row. They beat the brakes off of Auburn, kind of showing what this team can be if it is hitting on all cylinders. This has been a pretty rapid turnaround for Kentucky.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. And Auburn, I think, was a perfectly kind of opportune matchup for them. There's been a lot of teams that have talked about after upsets and stuff, sort of singling out Oscar and pick and roll and all that stuff. And, it requires a little bit of offensive discipline that not every team has. And Auburn doesn't play that way. They are not capable of doing the things that some teams have given Kentucky fits with because they're not that disciplined. They like helter-skelter ball, and Kentucky thrives in that. So this was a good matchup for them, and they took advantage of it.
And I think to Oscar's credit as well, he has improved a little bit on the defensive end of the floor. But really for Kentucky, they did this without Severe Wheeler and C.J. Frederick during this stretch. And you're kind of seeing everybody, I think, fully understand what their role is. Yeah. Jacob Toppin got that a little bit earlier than everybody else, but he's really hot right now. Antonio Reeves, my goodness, was scorching in the second half against Auburn yesterday. And I feel like it's tough to truly judge what everybody's going to do with this UK team moving forward, because that game looked like the UK team we all expected coming into the season. But now going into getting closer to postseason play, I mean, what can you reasonably expect, I guess, for this team? I
think you can expect just about anything. You can certainly make yourself believe, just about any case. And now he's got a long enough tenure there to where, if they go on kind of a run that seems unexpected, now you'll say to yourself, I should have seen that coming. They've done it this year and this year. And if they wash out early in the tournament again, I should have seen that coming too. It's what they do now. I think you can almost expect just about anything, but they're certainly significantly better and more, I think, well-rounded. More of an idea sort of where points are going to come from and that sort of thing. And getting three-pointers even without C.J. Frederick, I mean, it's a lot they should be encouraged about.
This is what is, I think, supposed to happen towards the end of the season. It's like the light bulbs are collectively turning on for guys who are trying to figure out, like, where do I fit in this puzzle. Oscar isn't having, like, monstrous stat lines, but he's being productive enough. I will make the argument that if this team is going to make a run in March, then Casey Wallace has to keep playing the way he is playing. I think it will be behind him leading the way for them in the postseason. Moving to Louisville now, the Georgia Tech game, it was kind of bewildering for me because they go through arguably the toughest stretch of their schedule. We talked about the improvement they showed and come right out against Georgia Tech, trailed by as much as 18 in that game before getting it down to 5 and still ultimately losing by double digits. What do you do with this one?
I mean, it's a big disappointment. You already had beaten this team. There's even less, for them necessarily to be playing for. And, I think Louisville fans have been looking for signs of progress, like permanent progress. The idea that this has kind of been moving somewhere and that the seemingly improved play the last 4 or 5 games is the real state of things. And instead, it was a very, very just kind of a lazy, backslidden game that could have been any time in January. It would have looked just like this. It's a real disappointment to sort of backslide in several of the things that they had been doing better.
Defensively they have not taken a big enough step forward, I think, this season. We can argue that they have improved in other areas this year, but that is the end of the floor where they're just not getting enough. Kenny says desperation all the time, but screw desperation, just execution in general. I mean, the amount of open threes Georgia Tech got, they made 12 in that game.
It's not a good three-point shooting team.
No, exactly. Right. And so I get that you might back off of them a little bit at the start, but if they keep hitting it, there was just not enough intense defensive effort, and that's been a recurring problem all season.
Yeah, I think the most alarming thing about this team is that they are a bad defensive team and have been and have remained one all year. There are definitely places in terms of half-court offense and that sort of thing where Louisville has improved a lot over the course of the year. There are no places where they are better defensively at all over the course of the season, and it's very bad defense that isn't improving. It's not like it's been middle of the road. It's very bad, down in the 300s in just about everything, and it has remained there all year. And I tend to think of defense in basketball as, I think, a lot simpler to teach and way more about effort level and intensity and communication and that sort of thing. And I think it's particularly worrisome that this is the place where they've not gotten any better at all.
obviously everybody's known where this is going for a good bit of time. The Louisville women, it's tough to figure out. There are times where they look like a great team, but the game against Notre Dame was a great microcosm of you look great for a while, but then kind of fall off in a disappointing senior day loss, 68-65. And to break that down, we'll bring on Alexis, Cubit, and Chrissy Banta. Here they are now, Alexis Cubit from the Courier-Journal and Chrissy Banta from ESPN Louisville. Guys, this game with Notre Dame they wanted this to be a revenge game, a day of celebration for senior day. And I think at halftime, when Louisville was up 33-24, Olivia Miles out of the game, you feel pretty good about that. And the second half comes, and I feel like from the first couple minutes of the second half, you could tell the energy in the Center was just a little off, and Notre Dame had really taken control of this game. What happened in this one?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? It just seemed like they just kind of flatlined. I mean, there was, I don't know if it was just shot selection or, we're just talking about the zone defense that Notre Dame was playing, but it just seemed like they didn't have that same level of energy. They just seemed really discombobulated. Shots weren't falling. They weren't getting the rebounds that they needed. I could see how, for a fan, it would be very frustrating to watch this team because of just how inconsistent they are. You get to this point of the season, you hope that some of those things that were plaguing them at the beginning of the year aren't still plaguing them now, and they are.
I 100% agree, especially when it comes to things like turnovers and not getting the bunnies, not getting the layups. They were 8 for 16 on layups again today, and I feel like the second half offense just went so stagnant. And in a game against a team like Notre Dame, especially a top 10 Notre Dame,
right,
you can't afford for your offense to go stagnant at any point throughout any quarter.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's zone really just kind of confused Louisville. As you said, that ball just stopped for a while, and it led to some forced shots, whether it was Haley Van Lith or others out there, and it really confused them in the second half.
Well, and then you think, that was the whole thing, like when we talked to Jeff Walz a couple weeks ago, is that they were, almost felt like it was an advantage to play Notre Dame twice in 10 days because it's fresh. They still have that, that film or whatever. So
Sting.
Exactly. So, they knew what they were going to get from Notre Dame.
It's a huge credit to Notre Dame and shows why they're a top 10 team to lose one of the best players in the country in Olivia Miles and then play one of the better second halves they've probably played all season on the road on senior day against a tough opponent.
When Olivia Miles went out, and thoughts out to her, I hope she's doing well. When Olivia Miles went out, you automatically just instinctively think, oh, Notre Dame's not the same team without Olivia Miles, and they're not the same team. But their performance in the second half proved that they don't necessarily need to have Olivia Miles out there 100% of the time to win the games they need to win. And they really showed up and showed out.
Working back to Louisville, I feel like this game was a bit of a microcosm of what we've talked about all season, is that one half, it can look like the team that everybody kind of expected with the high ranking and such, and then another half or another quarter, whatever game you want to pick, it all just kind of disappears for a little bit, or the chemistry's not there, the connectivity is not there, and it's hard to pinpoint, really not even just for us, but for Jeff Walz too, what the reason for that is, and if literally it improved at all in some of these games against high-quality opponents, they'd have a couple more big-time wins that turned out to be close losses.
I think you just said it's a chemistry. There doesn't seem to be that official gelling. Sometimes you have a lot of people, sometimes maybe playing hero ball or, kind of, just seem to get out of what they're supposed to do.
Out of the flow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think in those moments where they kind of get a little rattled, they don't necessarily come together the way that maybe would be more effective, and I mean, it's showing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the gelling of this team was something that the three of us and many others have been talking about since well before the season started. Right. We knew that it was going to take time. We didn't expect it to take this long, and we didn't expect it to never really happen. That's not something that we're used to seeing out of a Jeff Walz basketball team, because they usually will eventually click and come together, and they will eventually learn that, okay, if somebody's having an off night, we know that we can go to A, B, and C.
But this team going into the postseason as a whole, they're a 4 seed in the ACC tournament, so they keep the double bye. They've shown you enough to where you could say, yeah, I think they can make a run at an ACC title and possibly do something in the NCAA tournament, but they've also shown you another side where it's like, Okay, I'm not going to be surprised if they lose the first game in the ACC tournament and maybe go out early in the NCAA tournament.
No.
So all of that is to say, a difficult question, what do you expect?
I knew you were going to ask this.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to ask
I
this.
have
We
to.
talked about this.
It's such
you
a
know?
difficult question to answer
Yeah.
because you don't know what team you're going to get in which half.
Yep.
If we're watching a game and we get today's first half team against Notre Dame, we're probably going to see this Louisville team win an ACC championship this year.
Or first half against NC State.
Yeah. But, roll the dice, I guess. See what happens. It's probably harder to answer this year than any other year in the past.
I'll narrow it down to make it easier. If you had to pick one part of the game that would make you feel more at ease or more confident with getting the good Louisville going into the postseason, what area of the game is that?
I think the defense has come along. I think Cece's a really good defender. I think, Nyla does a really good job defending. I even think Marissa's made a lot of strides, both defensively and offensively.
She's becoming a nice spark, I think, off the
Yeah,
bench for them.
it's just the offense. That's the one area that I think is still a big struggle. But defensively, I would say that's where I would feel most comfortable saying, okay, if you give this team a chance, they've progressed more defensively than they have offensively.
Absolutely. It's easy to depend on the defense with this team. And I think we're going to have to heavily depend on that if we want to see them move in the right direction in the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament. And I think when it comes down to the players, Haley has to have a 20-plus point game every game. Mikasa has to have a very well-balanced stat line, which she's had as of late.
I think for me, it's efficiency a majority of the time with them on offense. Like just not exactly, okay, how many shots did you take, but like what shots? What shots did you take and what shots did you turn down? I think that's what's big for them in a lot of cases, because I think there were even some times against Notre Dame, you could hear the coaching staff on the bench, it's like, no, drive that, attack that. Like this person was open. It's that decision-making, I think, that costs them on that end of the floor sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and to that, you're going to have to see Haley Van Lith not force certain shots at certain times. That's been a long-standing issue with her, not just this season, but in past seasons as well. So if she can get away from some of that when it feels like she can't go to somebody else on the offense, then I think that this team will really excel.
And Jeff talked about this. He has not stopped anyone from shooting. Haley knows that, but I think some of the other players have to kind of really instill that in themselves and realize, it's okay for me to shoot in this situation, or, I shouldn't be intimidated to try for this shot, because like you said, you'd rather, lose off of missed shots than not taking shots at all.
Louisville fans have, kind of struggled with what to do with this team this season because, as you alluded to earlier, you are used to knowing what you got at this point in the year. And right now, you don't. And that's the best way I think I can close this segment as we move into the postseason. But we'll try to make some sense of it as it continues to go along. Alexis Cubit from the Courier-Journal and Chrissy Banta from ESPN Louisville. I'm Tyler Greever. Thanks for watching.